The Dark Elves, or the druchii as they call themselves in their own tongue, also known as the Nagarothi or the Dark Ones, are one of the most ancient, powerful and certainly the most sadistic of the three major elven civilizations of the mortal world. In the bleak, chilly lands of the continent of Nagaroth in the New World lies the dark elven kingdoms of the Witch King Malekith, a realm born of the intensities of malice and hate that only elves are capable of feeling. A kingdom that seeks nothing more than to despoil a world that they believe loathes their existence. With malevolent eyes, the Dark Elves watch this dying world, knowing it is their birthright to rule all that they survey, and that those who live upon it are born to do nothing more than to grovel at their feet. The druchii are raiders, slavers and heartless reavers of the highest degree, their every whim being nothing more than to sow misery and pain to all that oppose them, for misery and pain is the very lifeblood of their existence. Thus do their black arks and corsair fleets sail the great waters of the world, raiding and enslaving all they encounter as a tribute to their own avaricious desires. Yet even should every other land bow to their rule, the Dark Elves know that they cannot claim their glorious inheritance whilst their hated brethren, the High Elves, endure. Until the day dawns when the Isles of Ulthuan are finally theirs, the Dark Elves will continue their bloody quest. Great raiding fleets, their sails black against the night sky, bring woe and destruction to all the shores of the world, often because there is simply no one who can stand against them. With every year that passes, the power of Nagaroth ascends to greater heights, built upon the backs of slaves and fueled by a constant stream of plunder from far-off lands. As the other elder races fade, the Dark Elves thrive, knowing that their hour has at last come. Storm clouds gather across the high elf realms, and the Witch King's malevolent laughter echoes upon the wind. Nagaroth will rise, Ulthuan will fall, and a vengeance thousands of years in the making will finally see its bloody conclusion. The Dark Elves, or the druchii as they account themselves, are not the only elven race to walk the world. They are but one of three great civilizations to have sprung from Ulthuan's cradle, though they dismiss the others as snivelling and effete weaklings, unfit to inherit the legacies of ancient times. East of Nagaroth, still rooted to the fractured lands of Ulthuan, dwell the High Elves, the Asur. Between these two realms there can never be peace, for the betrayals of old were the opening volleys in a close-fought and bitter war that only escalated as the millennia have flowed past. Whilst Dark Elves aim to rule the world, they at least make their ambitions plain. Not so the High Elves, who seek control under the guise of protection and care not what consequence might have on other lands. Further eastward still, upon a continent infested with humans and other barbaric primitives, lies Athel Loren, the realm of the Wood Elves, the Asrai. The Wood Elves are held in contempt by both the Dark Elves and the High Elves, for they seek neither to rule nor control, only to endure. The Dark Elves, not so unlike their High Elven brethren, possess a cold if not glamorous beauty which only helps to hide the corruption and vileness which lurks beneath their skin. All elves are beautiful, but such beauty is different between the three peoples. The beauty of the Asur is one of light and glamour, whilst the beauty of the Asrai is feral and wild. Yet the beauty of the Dark Elves is a cold beauty, being said to take a man's breath away, both figuratively and literally. No matter their allegiance, all elves are long-lived to the point of immortality, possessed of a self-assurance that falls a little short of otherworldliness. They are swift of both body and reflex, capable of an effortless grace that shames the most elegant of men. Though all elves can broadly be accounted equal, the Dark Elves deem that only they make full use of their natural gifts, for they alone of elven kind do not allow such concepts as mercy and tradition to shackle their deeds. Elves are cunning of mind and clever beyond the ken of mere mortals. Their every word conceals a depth of meaning that is altered wholly by the slightest change of inflection or stance. Dark Elves, in particular, are adept at the art of twisting speech to serve their cause, and can gleefully manipulate the emotions of another to whatever end best suits their own interests. Thus do the Nagarothi make and break alliances in a careless fashion, knowing that their silver tongues can always be counted upon to heal the wounds of the past. It is this, more than anything else, which renders Dark Elf society so opportunistic and impetuous. When the deeds of old can be erased by a cleverly spoken word, what need is there for integrity and law? Though a Dark Elf's swiftness of mind and deftness of body serves him well individually, it is the combination of the two which grants him such murderous prowess in battle. Every detail of an opponent's poise and stance speaks volumes to an attentive elf, telling him not only where and when the enemy intends to strike, but also the manner in which the act of attacking will weaken the foe's guard. Thus has many an enemy died midway through a blow he thought fit to end the battle, his life stolen by an impossibly swift blade, guided by a quicksilver mind. Chaos has left its mark upon the elves, just as it has on almost all the races of the world. In this race, however, the power of the dark gods has taken a subtle form. It has fanned the arrogance of the elven soul, reinforcing all that is prideful and hubristic. Long ago, compassion could have been said to be the elves' defining trait, for such was the nature granted them by the old ones, but now generosity has been eclipsed by narcissism, empathy by conceit. However, chaos has not changed all the elves in equal manner. To the wood elves, it has made them isolationist, deniers of the wider world who blindly hope that so long as their realm knows order, no danger can threaten it. The high elves have become ever more stubborn, having gained certainty beyond words' ability to convey that they, and they alone, can shield the world against the perils it faces. For the dark elves, however, chaos has brought enlightenment, the knowledge that the world exists only for the pleasure of the strong. They have embraced this revelation with a burning passion that shames the cold hearts of their ancient cousins. Indeed, it may yet set the very world afire. For the dark elves, all of the world's bounty is theirs to do with as they wish, provided that they have the strength to claim it. They have turned aside the benevolent gods of the elven pantheon, flocking instead to the worship of their more capricious and cruel deities, in particular Cain, lord of murder. It is a match well made, for the dark elves care nothing for the sanctity of life and consider the lesser races to be nothing more than insects, begging to be ground beneath a boot heel if no more productive or entertaining use can be found for them. Naturally, the Dark Elves consider all other intelligent races inferior. Even those who approach them in skill and intellect, the Nagarothi dismiss as weaklings, sneering at the laws and traditions that waste resources nurturing the weak, even as they shackle the ambitions of the strong. The Dark Elves have no such restraint. In Nagaroth, the weak perish, and the strong take whatever they desire. None of this is to say that the Dark Elves wish to see all other peoples exterminated out of hand. So long as mines must be worked, farms must be tended, fortresses must be razed, and ritual sacrifices are required to win the favour of the gods, there will always be a place for primitives in the realm of Nagaroth. Indeed, some of the more capable barbarians can even be wielded as weapons in their own right, manipulated by threats, trinkets and empty promises into assailing the shores of hated Ulthuan, or else wreaking havoc upon the high seas. Only the high elves have no hope of survival under the yoke of Nagarothi rule, for every dark elf dream of the day when their ancient enemies will at last be scoured from every corner of the world. None consider the possibility that when the last high elf dies, screaming in agony upon Cain's altar, that ultimate victory might leave a void of purpose that is impossible to fill. On that day, the Dark Elves will learn just how much of their souls have been devoured by their ancient hatred, and they may not find the tally to their liking. All elves speak a single tongue called Eltharin, but the language has since splintered into different dialects, each representing one of the three factions of elves in the world. The Dark Elves of Nagaroth, always seeking to distance themselves from their former brethren in Ulthuan, have developed their own language, called druchii. In many ways the language is similar to Eltharin, but with a few alterations. There is but one ruler of the Dark Elves, and his name is Malekith, the Witch King of Nagaroth. He is the son of Inarion, the greatest of the elven heroes, and all elves believe that greatness and destiny lies deep within his very blood and his very soul. None would dare to ever defy the Witch King and his rule, for all those that have no longer lived within this world. His rule is absolute, for he is the very embodiment of all the druchii, and so long as he lives, the High Elves will never know true peace. Below the Witch King is a collection of lords and ladies from the major cities of Nagaroth. These lords of the Dark Elves live in 6 heavily fortified city-states, each one being as powerful and wealthy as any human kingdom, their innumerable towers, built from black stone, rising like sinister pinnacles into the dark storm clouds. All of these cities are evil places, steeped in death and agony. Their lightless dungeons are crammed with captives whose wailings fill the air, and whose moans seep through the thick walls of the high towers, saturating the soul with pain and misery. From the tips of the high towers, above the filth and smog of sacrificial fires, the sorceresses cast their malign magic over the world. Rulership of the dark elven kingdoms is rigidly structured, its titles and positions stemming from the ancient traditions of pre-sundering Nagarith. New ranks and honours are created only on the rarest occasions, and most of those are abolished at Malekith's decree as soon as he hears of them. For the Witch King to do otherwise would suggest that the royal traditions of Nagaritha were somehow flawed, and if there is one truth closer to Malekith's black heart than any other, it is that the Nagarithi of old was a realm beyond all reproach. This underlying order goes entirely unnoticed by those few outsiders who glimpse the inner workings of Nagaroth. Seeing the constant stream of politicking, disgrace, betrayal and assassination, they confuse an attack upon the person holding a particular position with an attack upon the position itself. Yet no dark elf wishes to see these ancient titles cast down. For there is no more effective way of measuring one's worth than by reckoning the minions that grovel below and the fools who preen above. Malekith's inner circle always numbers exactly 100 lords and ladies of Nagaroth called Dreadlords, though not all are living. Claiming a seat at the obsidian table is one of the highest honours, but also one of the most dangerous. The Witch King is nothing if not mercurial in his favours, and it is not unusual for fewer dreadlords to leave the chamber than entered it. Down the ages there have always been nobles clever enough to avoid falling victim to the Witch King's explosive temper, and it is no different now. Closest of all Malekith's counsellors is his mother, Marathi. This honour is not granted out of filial regard, but because the hag sorceress can be trusted only when kept in plain sight. Kuran Darkhand, captain of the Black Guard, is a different matter entirely, for his loyalty to the Witch King is without question. The third most influential seat on the council belongs to the cadaverous noble known only as Ezrasaur, a particularly cold-blooded individual widely assumed to be Malekith's spy master, though this has never been officially confirmed. Venel Chillblade, the latest incumbent of a seat that has become almost a hereditary privilege, holds sway over fleets that plough the seas east of Nagaroth, whilst the darkly beautiful Drain Brackblood directs the plunder of westward realms. Command of Nagaroth's armies is split between several dark elf nobles, of whom the heavily scarred Emir Soulflare is most prominent. His is perhaps the most tenuous seat on the council, for he earns glory for every victory and blame for every defeat. So far, Soulflare has managed to shift any blame to other, now dead council members, but this game can only be played for so long. Dark elves have one major source of income: slave labour. Dark elves raid all other lands, particularly Ulthuan, home of their enemies, the High Elves. They take food and treasure, but the main purpose of their raids is to obtain slaves. Slaves play an important part in druchii society, as they perform the menial chores that an enterprising druchii considers below him. Slaves also make up the bulk of the ritual sacrifices to the god Cain. Dark elves do not value their slaves' lives, and often kill one or two to show the other slaves their brutality. Slave revolts are rare and harshly suppressed, and due to the brutality of the Dark Elves, usually only the new stock have the will to participate in any revolt. The only successful revolts usually occur at sea, aboard either the slave ships or the Black Arks. In the former case, the surviving slaves tend to sail the captured ship to their freedom. In the latter case, the slave revolt is usually focused on stealing ships and escaping rather than taking over the Black Ark. The Dark Elves take to the sea in their Black Arks. Kept afloat by magic, the Black Arks travel far and wide to procure slaves. Each Black Ark is home to a small army of Dark Elf raiders and a small fleet of raiding vessels. These forces can be landed on the coast of an unsuspecting kingdom, perform a lightning raid, and be off before any of the local defense forces are able to react. The raiders do not do well in stand-up fights. In this way, for hundreds if not thousands of years, countless millions of doomed souls have been taken back to Naggaroth to a fate worse than death. The elves worship a wide variety of deities of varying power and temperament. These beings are divided into two main spheres of influence, with neither having dominance over the other. This is encapsulated in the elven belief of Yenlui, or balance, a philosophy that dictates that there must be harmony between the light and dark natures of the elven spirit. The most widely acknowledged elven gods outside of Naggaroth are the Kadai, or the gods of the heavens, who represent the more positive characteristics of elven culture and the natural world. These are ruled by Asurion, the greatest of the gods, and include such figures as Aisha, goddess of fertility and healing, Kurnus, the god of hunters, and Vol, the smith god. In elven belief, many of the unsavory aspects of their nature and the world at large are also represented by gods known as the Sitharai, or gods of the underworld. Of these, Cain is the most well-known, being a god of murder and war. But there are others such as Erilth Kial, who rules the underworld, Atharti, a goddess of pleasure and indulgence, and Hecate, the goddess of dark magic. These gods are not openly worshipped on Ulthuan by the High Elves, though they have small shrines that are usually shunned except during essential ceremonies for the sole purpose of appeasement. Unlike their cousins on Ulthuan, the Dark Elves openly pay homage to these forbidding powers, the worship of whom rose through the cults of excess that preceded the civil war of the Sundering. Dark Elves are bitter, vicious killers that detest all other creatures, even other Dark Elves. Druchii warriors love nothing more than to see their enemies screaming in pain and take pleasure from spilling blood and spreading misery. There are no druchii craftsmen, workers or farmers. Such menial roles belong to slaves. Each and every druchii is born, bred and trained to be a heartless warrior. They are relentlessly aggressive in battle, shouting praises to their black gods as they cut down their foes. The Dark Elves reserve their deepest enmity for the High Elves of Ulthuan, who they see as treacherous usurpers. For over 5,000 years, the armies of Naggaroth have waged war upon their kin. Battles between Dark Elves and High Elves are exceptionally bloody, as the Dark Elves hurl themselves at their foes with unending ferocity, and the warriors of Ulthuan stoically stand their ground despite the terrifying beasts and merciless agonies unleashed upon them. Thus do the dread hosts of Naggaroth spread across the world, their fell banners dancing grimly on the wind, each warrior alert to the prospect of wicked joy that every battle brings. Ranks of spearmen advance remorselessly across the field, a shadow of death that consumes all who stand in its path.